Welcome to the next part. I have to admit, I feel like an addict. I am just reading the entire book. And I am going to talk about part 5. And then I'm going to read live read 72 and 73, because apparently those are good chapters too. So I've read up to those chapters, and there's a lot of my questions getting answered and a lot of interesting things happening. And I feel like the Sanderlanche is just beginning. And I feel like as soon as I do this live read, the rest of the chapters will just be the Sanderlanche from this point on, which I'm very excited about. But I am dying because I just stopped reading at 72. And I have to, not that I have to, I love doing this, talking about it and processing my thoughts, but I have to talk for 20 or 30 minutes before I can read. So I'm going to just briefly mention all these things because I am dying to read. I'm sorry if you're annoyed that I keep doing this. I just want to figure out what happens in this story. I learned what the trust was. That's where the adium is. That's crazy. They're right by the pits of Hassan. That's also crazy. I learned the first generation is the people who went with Reshek, the other terracemen who went with Reshek. The terrace religion is the only true religion. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happened in these chapters. And a lot of interesting things, like I don't understand some of these things yet. Like, why does Ruin not know how to read? Why are the things that are written in steel things that are okay? Like, Spook sent this message with Goradel, and Marsh intercepts it, and he reads it aloud, or he reads it. I think he reads it aloud, but he has the thought of why do I have to read this aloud to a Ruin? That has to be the way to defeat it. And is Ruin's body atium? Like, and then we also learned that there's 16 elementic elements. The table, they come in batches of 4, which I feel like I was right about. So that makes me happy about that. But there's all sorts of other stuff that's going on in this story. It's a wild one. So get ready. Let's just jump right into this. In chapter 59, Tensoon talks to Sazid. Really interesting conversation. But the little bit here, it says, the terraceman sat on a chair, a portfolio open on the desk before him, a pile of notes beside it. Sazid looked different to Tensoon, for a reason that he couldn't pin down. The keeper wore the same robes and had the same ferrochemical bracers on his arm. There was something missing. But there was something missing. I think that's just his depression. I think the thing that's missing, I don't think that question was answered yet. It made me think it's either it is depression. When I got later on in the story, I revisited that, and I'm like, oh, does Tensoon recognize him as, like, a keeper because he also was a keeper? No, he's a second generation. How did the second generation get made? Or he's third generation. How did the third generation get made? They're not the original terracemen. But the terrace people are still alive and well. They're in the pits of Hassan. And it's interesting that the other terrace are by the pits of Hassan too. This is going to be like their new place to dwell. I'm going to breeze through these chapters because I want to do the read so bad. Let me know in the comments very quickly if you actually, well, to be honest, I'm going to finish this today because I'm literally going to do a live read, and then go on the beach and then just read until I have to do till 79, I think. And then I'm going to live read 79, 80, 81, and 82, I think. Maybe. Around there. But, so I'm going to be in a reading mood today. Chapter 60, Yeoman and Vin talk. And this conversation is really interesting because it seems like Yeoman knows something that she doesn't, and he keeps putting this out there, but he doesn't have the atium. That's kind of learned later. But I think that was in this chapter? I don't know. It kept making me think that the Lord Ruler was alive, which was one of the theories that I had a while ago. It says, you do it, Vin said. You're still worshiping the Lord Ruler. He's not gone, Yeoman said. Vin frowned. No, Yeoman said, apparently noting her confusion. I haven't seen or heard of him since his disappearance. However, neither do I put any credence in the reports of his death. He was rather dead, Vin said. Trust me. I don't trust you. I'm afraid. I don't trust you. I'm afraid, Yeoman said. Tell me of that evening. Tell me precisely what happened. She tells him, and Yeoman still doesn't believe it. But I think Yeoman kind of knows that he's dead now, and then maybe he thinks that Vin is going to be like the new Lord Ruler, because Vin essentially says that. Says, when you first captured me, she said, I wondered why you kept me alive, an enemy mistborn. Why not simply kill me and be done with it? You claimed you wanted to give me a trial, but I saw through that. I knew you had another motive. And now I know what that is. She looked him in the eyes. You said earlier that you planned to execute me for the Lord Ruler's murder, but you just admitted that you plan to execute me for the Lord Ruler, but you just admitted that you think he's still alive. You say that he'll return to topple me from my place, so you can't kill me unless you interfere with your God's plan. Yeoman turned away from her. You can't kill me, she said. Not until you're certain of my place in your theology. That's why you kept me alive. That's why you risk bringing me here to talk. You need information only I can give. You have to get testimony from me in a trial of sorts, because you want to know what happened that night, so you can try to convince yourself that your God still lives. Yeoman didn't respond. Admit it. I'm in no danger here, she said, and she stepped forward. It's interesting. It's a wild section. Yeoman turned away from her once more. Those lumps of metal do me no good, save perhaps to keep you in check. No, the food was a real resource. The Lord Ruler gave me the riches I would require to establish power again. I only need to figure out what he wants me to do next. The soldiers finally succeeded in pulling her away. It's a wild section. Like, Yeoman seems like he's actually a good ruler. Seems like he wants his food to keep his people alive. He doesn't have the adium. He has a few adium beads, but not a ton. And that's infuriating to Marsh, who comes up later in the story, which we'll get there. Chapter 61, Ellen, what is it? What does my note say here? Ellen readies an attack. That's what it is. And that's all that happens in that chapter. There's not like a ton of information in that chapter, but Ellen just gets ready for an attack. And I think you're kind of like, oh, shoot, he's doing what he shouldn't do. I think when Ellen is readying for an attack, when he sees the mist spirit, or when he sees preservation, he's like, preservation is like, don't attack Fadrex or Fadro. And I thought Ellen was going to turn around and go back, but he's readying for an attack, which seems like exactly what Ruin wants to do. But why does Ruin want them to attack Fadro? Is this just like as a distraction? I don't know. 62. Sazid. This is another Sazid section. Sazid stood outside the room looking in. Spook lay in his bed. I was so happy that Spook was still alive. That was really the highlight of this chapter. And then Spook essentially gets up and he's like, send a message. He gets Gordal to send him a message. And then there's a quiet realization between Tensoon and Sazid, which is a great section of writing here. He calls him the announcer, not announcer at all, but holy first witness. There's a discrepancy there. And then it says this. Sazid stared at the creature in the hallway. Or no. What bargain, Breeze asked, clearly confused. Immortality, Tensoon said quietly. In exchange for their Furukami, they gave it up, along with something else. Sazid stared at the creature in the hallway. A creature who thought like a man, but had the form of a beast. They gave up their humanity, Sazid whispered. Tensoon nodded. They live on? Sazid asked, stepping forward. The Lord Ruler's companions? The very terracemen who climbed to the well with him? We call them the first generation, Tensoon said, the founders of the Kandra people. The father transformed every living feruchemist into a mistwraith, beginning that race. As good friends, however, he returned to sapience with a few hemalurgical spikes. You've done your work poorly, Keeper. I expected that you dragged this out of me long before I had to leave. Isn't that wild? He goes, I've been a fool. I've been such a fool. That blew my mind. That was actually crazy. And I don't know if I would have actually ever guessed that. That's actually a wild thought. It makes me annoyed that I didn't actually have any questions for where the other Pac-Men were with Alendi and Rashek. I thought maybe that he just had killed them, but now in this book that you're learning that he's actually not all that evil, you're like, oh no, he definitely wouldn't kill them. He transformed them into mistwraiths. Is that worse? I don't know. So they have immortality, but they gave up their Furukami. Chapter 63, Marsh comes back and there's no adium. Yeoman seems to be like smart but also stupid at the same time. And when Marsh comes back, it's actually pretty terrifying. But I don't know if he's in control or not. He seems like he's not in control, but at the same time, he does seem like he's in control. He's like thinking his own thoughts independently. It seems like Ruin can't get to those thoughts. So, again, very intriguing stuff. I feel like I'm going way too fast, but I am just dying to read. The story has definitely captured me at this point. For all my frustrations and annoyances early on, right now I'm at a point where I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually becoming really fascinating and I really want to get into the story more and I want to get answers. I feel like my first, maybe I should just like do a second time read through this and just talk through all my thoughts and like, oh, this is here, this is there, you know? But right now, I just want to read and I just want to figure it out. I just want to read 72. There's another section. This is a weird one because Spook seems to know something. He met Goradel's eyes. Go to the armory and have a sheet of metal pounded thin, Spook said. Then return here with something I can use to scratch the metal. These words must be written in steel. I cannot speak them aloud. Why can Ruin? What is the deal with steel and with Ruin? Can he not read? I don't understand that. I really don't understand that. Yeah, I'm lost with that one. Hold on one second. Chapter 65. This is Elend, and there's like an attack. The Colossus are kind of captured by Ruin, but there's still a few Colossus in Vin's control. This chapter goes all over the place. And then eventually, yeah, he couldn't control the Colossus, no matter how he pushed or pulled on their emotions. He couldn't bring a single one under his power. That only left fighting, and the men weren't prepared for battle. He'd force them to abandon camp too quickly. And, I mean, this gets revealed later, but the fact that, okay, so the 16, well, I want to talk about the 16 for a second. The people that they sent away are Allomancers now, and they're all going back to Luthadel. So Luthadel is going to be this city, like, I think that one of the prophecies, one of the Kandra said that, like, she's going to lead an army of Mistings, or lead an army of Allomancers. So a 16th of these are Allomancers, but what are they allomantically able to do? What are the other two metals? That's the thing that I don't know or understand. And it divides them up. I've actually forgot to take a note of that, and I should have. I gotta try to find that. Yeah, it's some of this is wild. My thoughts are just all over the place. That you know a book is getting better when my notes become less and less because I'm just turning pages and I like literally have dropped my pencil and forgot all about taking notes. I was just enamored in this morning. Just wanted to keep reading. Says he nodded. The place where Kelsier had trained his original army of Ska soldiers was a short trip to the north. One of the cave complexes is the Kandra homeland. It abuts the pits of Hassan, in fact. Several of the Kandra passages run into the pits and had to be closed off, lest workers in the pits find their way into the homeland. Does your homeland grow adium? No, but they store it. That's where the trust is, which is wild. And so they're at the top of Fadrix now, and they're essentially ready for like a siege. And there's lightning happening, and it's all over the place. And then Vin, this was a really cool section. This was like a mic drop moment. Vin is ready to go back to Luthadel, and it says at the end of this chapter, "Whoa, she thought to ruin." Or now she thought to ruin. Sorry, who she knew was watching her carefully, although he hadn't revealed himself since she'd drawn upon the mists. Let's have a chase, you and I. A little Kelsier callback from the literal. What is that? The first like part of Mistborn. I love that little callback. That is great. So she's on her way. Where is she? She's on her way to Luthadel. She gathered her horseshoes. She's got to go. And so she's going to round up this army and they're going to march out. How, like, her being able to draw in the mist is still weird to me. I don't necessarily know or understand how that is or what's really happening there. It just seems bizarre. So I'll get answers, I guess, as I go. So Sazid goes into the trust, and he's essentially like being accosted by the second freaking generation. The second generation is the worst. I just want to slap them all. They're just so stupid. And I gotta find this section where they talked about. Man, this is gonna bother me. I didn't take a note of that because I literally have been forgetting to take notes for the last like 3 chapters. So he sees the second generation, and he's on his way to the first generation. The first generation appeared to have 10 members. They arranged themselves on benches out of respect as he had moved to the table so that he was seated before them like a presenter before an audience. Now, he said, raising a metal scratching pen, let us begin. We have much work to do. So I guess he's going to record everything that happens, and I guess this... I think the stuff that is getting written is really from Sazid in these epigraphs. Chapter 69 is when Marsh intercepts Gorodel, and he's confused. He's kind of all over the place here. Ruin pushed and pulled, manipulating Marsh's emotions, eventually getting him so that, yes, why should he bother disagreeing? Why argue with his god, his lord, his self? Marsh held the sheet flaring tin and steel, and iron to get a better look at its content with an inquisitor's strange metallic sight. I don't know. This part is just so confusing to me. So I don't know what's going on. Man, I really am speeding through this because I just want to read. Chapter 70. This attack is kind of being pushed on the city. And they talk about one of the physicians rushed forward, taking it away. Mist sickness, he asked. And that's kind of where they realized that the mistings, or the 16 people that they sent away. Okay, here we go. 16. Oh, here we go. Yes, I found this. Okay. 16, Ellen said, glancing at the sick boy. The number of original inquisitors, Yeoman said. The number of precepts in each Canton charter. The number of allomantic metals. Wait, Ellen said. What? Allomantic metals. There are only 14 of those. Yeoman shook his head. 14 we know of. Assuming your lady was right about the metal paired to aluminum. However, 14 is not a number of power. Allomantic metals come in sets of 2, with groupings of 4. It seems likely that there are 2 more we haven't discovered, bringing the number to 16. 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. 4 physical metals. 4 mental metals. 4 enhancement metals. And 4 temporal metals. I don't know what those are. Did I literally miss that in the end of the book? Does it actually have that chart and I just literally wasn't even seeing it? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. But it only has 14 in this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it has 14 listed. I'm looking at this thing. The actual table has 16. Sorry if that was loud. The actual table has 16, but the listing here is 14. So what are the other 2? It probably has to do with aluminum and duralumin. So the ones of power, let me break this down real quick. 4 physical metals. I think the 4 physical metals are iron, steel, tin, and pewter. That seems basic, and that seems like it makes sense to me. The 4 mental metals are zinc, brass, copper, and bronze. That makes sense too. The 4 enhancement metals. Wait, enhancement metals. Oh yeah, adium, palladium. I would say aluminum and duralumin. And then this next one is 4 temporal metals. Gold, electrum, maybe? The last two, the temporal and the enhancement ones. The enhancement ones I think are definitely adium and palladium, but I don't know if it's gold and electrum. It doesn't seem like gold and electrum are there. It seems like it would be aluminum and duralumin. But I don't know. And I have no guess what these other two are. I think one of my curiosities is, are the mistings or the mist fallen seem like they now have power in? To me, they seem like they have power in one of these last two. And so the mist wasn't bad in those cases. The mist wasn't inflicting these cases. I think it was ruin and preservation. Part of it was ruin in that it was killing these people, but the 16% that got sick seemed to become allomancers. So it was destroying, but also preserving. But I don't know are they allomancers in anything? Do they now have just like any allomantic ability? I don't know. I don't want to know. That's a confusing section to me. Okay. Chapter 71, right before. Sazid is talking with these people. And this is when he learns of the adium. He learns of the trust, and he opens this trust using his last bit of pewter. He has like a little pewter stored in this ring, and he uses that, and he finds the adium. Now, is the adium going to be the body that he uses? I don't know where this body is. It seems like that's the case, but I just don't know what these other ones are. Guys, all my theories are all over the place. I just don't know. I just have to read. I know this is a short, quick, little deep dive on them, and I know maybe some of you are annoyed because I'm like doing this quicker. But my insatiable appetite to read is just, I need to know. I need to figure out the answers. So this book is going to be finished today because I'm going to read these 2 chapters live, 72 and 73. Like 15 pages. And then I'm going to go to the beach and read more. Well, I'm going to go to the beach, read 74, 75, 76, 78. Then I'll live read 79. Probably not live read 70. Or maybe just reread 80 or live read 80. That'll be a long read. That's going to be like a 2-3 hour video probably. We'll see if I can actually do that. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm going to read. This is chapter 72. And I'm dying to know. Yes, there are 16 metals. I found it highly unlikely that the Lord Ruler did not know of them all. Indeed, the fact that he spoke of several on the plaques in the storage cache means that he knew at least of those. I must assume that he did not tell humankind of them earlier for a reason. Perhaps he held them back to give them a secret edge. Much as he held back the single nugget of preservation's body that he made men into mistborn. Or perhaps they decided that humankind had enough power in the 10th metal they had already understood. Some things we shall never know. Part of me still finds what he did regrettable. During the 1,000-year reign of the Lord Ruler, how many people were born, snapped, lived, and died, never knowing that they were mistings, simply because their metals were unknown. Oh, that's an interesting one. That's what I was thinking Ellen was originally. That's so cool. Of course, this did give us a slight advantage at the end. Ruin had a lot of trouble giving duralumin to his inquisitors, since they needed an allomancer who could burn it to kill before they could use it. And since none of the duralumin mistings in the world knew about their power, they didn't burn it and reveal themselves to Ruin. So what does duralumin do just by itself? That left most inquisitors without the power of duralumin, save in a few important cases, such as Marsh. That left the inquisitors without the power of duralumin, save in a few important cases as Marsh, where they got it from a mistborn. This was usually considered a waste, for if a mistborn was killed with hemalurgy, only one of their 16 powers could be drawn out and the rest would be lost. Ruin deemed it much better to try to subvert them and gain access to all of their power. It began raining just before Vin reached Luthadel. A quiet, cold drizzle that wetted the night, but it did not banish the mists. She flared her bronze. In the distance she could sense allomancers, mistborn, chasing her. There were at least a dozen of them homing in on her position. She landed on the city wall, bare feet slipping slightly on the stones. Beyond her stretched Luthadel, even now in its proud sprawl. Founded 1,000 years before the Lord Ruler, it was built atop the Well of Ascension. During the 10 centuries of his reign, Luthadel had grown, becoming the most important and most crowded place in all the empire, and it was dying. Vin stood up straight, looking out over the vast city. Pockets of flame flared where buildings had caught fire. The flames defied the rain, illuminating the various slums and other neighborhoods like watchfires in the night. In their light, she could see that the city was a wreck. Entire swaths of the town had been torn apart. The buildings broken or burned. The city streets were eerily vacant. Nobody fought the fires. Nobody huddled in the gutters. The capital, once home to hundreds of thousands, seemed empty. Wind blew through Vin's rain-wetted hair, and she felt a shiver. The mists, as usual, stayed away from her, pushed aside by her allomancy. She was alone in the largest city in the world. No, not alone. She could feel them approaching. Rune's minions. She had led them here, made them assume she was bringing them to the adium. There would be far more of them than she could fight. She was doomed. That was the idea. She launched off the wall, shooting through the mists, ash, and rain. She wore her mist cloak, more out of nostalgia than utility. It was the very same one she'd always had, the one Kelsier had given her on their very first night of training. Maybe there's just something more involved with the mist cloaks. She landed with a splash atop the building and then leaped again, bounding over the city. She wasn't certain if it was poetic or ominous that it was raining this night. There had been another time when she had visited the Kredik Shaw in the rain. A part of her still thought she should have died that night. She landed on the street, then stood upright, her tasseled mist cloak falling around her, hiding her arms and her chest. She stood quietly, looking up at the Kredik Shaw. A hill of 1,000 spires. The Lord Ruler's palace, location of the Well of Ascension. The building was an assemblage of several low wings toppled by dozens of rising towers, spires, and spines. The awful near symmetry of the amalgamation was only made more unsettling by the presence of the mist and ash. The building had been abandoned since the Lord Ruler's death. The doors were broken and she could see scattered windows in the walls. Kredik Shaw was as dead as the city it had once dominated. A figure stepped up beside her. "Here?" Ruin said. "This is where you lead me? We have searched this place." Vin remained quiet, gazing up at the spires. Black fingers of metal reaching up into the blacker sky. "My inquisitors are coming," Ruin whispered. "You shouldn't have revealed yourself," Vin said, not looking toward him. "You should have waited until I retrieve the adium. I'll never do it now." "Ah, but I no longer believe that you have it," Ruin said in a fatherly voice. Child. I believed you at first, indeed. I gathered my powers ready to face you. When you came here, however, I knew that you had misled me." "You don't know that for certain," Vin said softly, voice complemented by the quiet rain. Silence. "No," Ruin finally said. "Then you have to try to make me talk," she whispered. "Try? You realize the forces I can bring against you, bear you, child. You realize the forces I can bring to bear against you, child? You realize the power I have, the destruction I represent? I am the mountains that crush. I am the waves that crash. I am the storms that shatter. I am the end." Ooh, that's a good line. Vin continued to stare up into the falling rain. She didn't question her plan. It wasn't her way. She decided what to do. It was time to spring Ruin's trap. She was tired of being manipulated. "You will never have it," Vin said. "Not while I live." Ruin screamed. a sound of primal anger of something that had to destroy. Then he vanished. Lightning flared, a wave of power moving through the mists. It illuminated robed figures in the blackened rain walking toward her, surrounding her. Vin turned to face a ruined building a short distance away and watched as a figure climbed over the rubble. Now lit only faintly by starlight, the figure had a bare chest, a stark ribcage, and taut muscles. Rain ran down his skin, dripping from his spikes that sprouted from his chest, one between each set of ribs. His face bore spikes in the eyes, one of which had been pounded further into his skull, crushing the socket. Normal Inquisitors had 10 or 11 spikes. Marsh appeared to have upwards of 20. He growled softly. And the fight began. Gosh, this is crazy. Vin threw back her cloak, spraying water from the tassels, and pushed herself forward. 13 Inquisitors hurled through the night sky toward her. Vin ducked a flurry of axe swings and slammed a push toward a pair of Inquisitors, burning duralumin. The creatures were flung away by their spikes, and Vin accelerated in a sudden lurch to the side. She hit another Inquisitor, feet against his chest, water sprayed, flecked with ash. As Vin reached down and grabbed a spike in the Inquisitor's left eye, she pulled herself backward and flared pewter. She lurched, and the spike came free. The Inquisitor screamed, but it did not fall dead. It looked at her, the left side of its face like a gaping hole, and hissed. Apparently, removing one eye spike wasn't enough to kill. Ruin laughed in her head. This is terrifying. Where is the misting army? The Allomancers have to pop up in this. That's my answer for this. The spikeless Inquisitor reached for her, and Vin pulled herself into the sky, yanking one of the metal spikes, one of the metal spires of the Kretic shot. She downed the contents of the metal vial as she flew, restoring her steel. A dozen figures in black robes sprang up through the falling rain to follow. Marsh remained below, watching. Vin gritted her teeth, then whipped out a pair of daggers and pushed herself back down, directly toward the Inquisitors. She passed among them, surprising several who had probably expected her to jump away. She slammed directly into the creature she'd pulled the spikes from, spinning him in the air, ramming her daggers into his chest. He gritted his teeth, laughing, and slapped her arms apart and kicked her toward the ground. She fell with the rain. Vin hit hard, but managed to land on her feet. The Inquisitor is hit by the cobblestone black dagger, or a cobblestone back. The Inquisitor hit the cobblestone's back first. Sorry, her dagger is still in his chest. But he stood up easily and tossed the daggers aside, shattering them on the cobblestones. Then he moved suddenly, too quickly. Vin didn't have time to think as he splashed through the misty rain to grab her by the throat. I've seen that speed before, she thought as she struggled. Not from the Inquisitors, from Sazid. That's a ferrochemical power, just like the strength Marsh used earlier. That was the reason for the new spikes. These other Inquisitors didn't have as many as Marsh, but they clearly had some new powers. Strength, speed. Each of these creatures was essentially another Lord Ruler. Gosh. You see, Ruin asked. Vin cried out, duralumin pushing against the Inquisitors, tearing herself out of his grasp. The move left her throat bleeding from his fingernails, and she had to down another vial of metals, her last, to restore her steel as she skidded across the wet ground. Ferrochemical storage has run out, she told herself. Even Allomancers make mistakes. I can win. I love her confidence. Yet she wavered, breathing heavily as she came to a rest, one hand to the ground, up to the wrist in cold rainwater. Kelsier had struggled fighting one Inquisitor. What was she doing fighting 13? Sodden-robed figures landed around her. Vin kicked, slamming a foot into the Inquisitor's chest, then pulled herself off to spin away from another. She rolled across the slick cobblestones, an obsidian axe nearly taking off her head as she came up and kicked two pewter-enhanced feet at the knees of an opponent. Bones crunched. The Inquisitor screamed and fell. Vin pushed herself up to her feet with one hand, then pulled on the spires above, throwing herself up about 10 feet to dodge the multitude of swings that came after her. She landed on the ground, grabbing a handle of the fallen Inquisitor's axe. She swung it up, spraying water. Her skin stained with ash as she blocked a blow. You cannot fight, Vin, Ruin said. Each blow only helps me. I am Ruin. She screamed, throwing herself forward in a reckless attack, shouldering aside one Inquisitor, then slamming her axe into the side of another. They growled and swung, but she stayed a step ahead, barely dodging their strikes. The one she had knocked down stood up, his knees heeled. He was smiling. A blow she didn't see took her in the shoulder, throwing her forward. She felt warm blood running down her back, but Pewter deadened the pain. She threw herself to the side and regained her feet, clutching her axe. The Inquisitors stalked forward. Marsh watched quietly, rain dripping down his face, spikes protruding from his body like the spires of the Cretic Shaw. He did not join the fight. Is Marsh controlling them? And if he kills himself, will all of them die? Vin growled, then pulled herself into the sky again. She shot ahead of her foes and bounded from spire to spire, using the metal as anchors. The 12 Inquisitors followed like a flock of ravens, leaping between spires, robes flapping, each taking different paths than she. She lurched through the mists, which continued to spin around her in defiance of the rain. An Inquisitor landed against the spire she was aiming for. She yelled, swinging her axe in an overhand blow as she landed. But he pushed off, dodging her swing, then pulled himself back immediately. She kicked at his feet, sending both her and the opponent sprawling into the air. Then she grabbed his robe as they fell. He looked up, teeth clenched in a smile, and knocked her axe out of her hand with an inhumanly strong arm. His body began to swell, gaining the unnatural bulk of a ferrochemist, tapping strength. He laughed at Vin and grabbed her neck. He didn't seem to notice as Vin pulled them both slightly to the side, as they fell through the air. They struck one of the lower spires. The metal piercing the surprised Inquisitor's chest, Vin wrenched herself out of the way to one side, but hung onto his head, her weight pulling him down the spire. She didn't watch as it ripped through his body. Hold on 1 second. Someone's knocking my door. I gotta do this in a second. All right, we're back. Sorry. Okay, where was I? Sorry. Marsh bellowed in anger. 4 more Inquisitors landed around her. Vin kicked at one, but it moved with ferrochemical speed, catching her foot. Another seized her by the arm and yanked her to the side. She cried out, kicking her way free. But a third one grabbed her, its grip enhanced by both allomantic and ferrochemical strength. The other 3 followed, holding her with claw-like fingers. Taking a deep breath, Vin extinguished her tin, then burned Duralumin, steel, and pewter. She pushed outward with a sudden wave of power, and the Inquisitors were tossed away by their spikes. They sprawled, falling to the ground, cursing. Vin hit the cobblestones. Suddenly, the pain in her back and in her throat seemed impossibly strong. She flared tin to clear her mind, but still stumbled woozily as she climbed to her feet. She used all of her pewter in one burst. She moved to run and found a figure standing in front of her. Marsh was silent, as another wave of lightning lit the mist. Bleeding from a wound that probably would have killed anyone else. With no pewter to heal it, she was truly desperate. Okay, now, she thought as Marsh slapped her. The blow threw her to the ground. Nothing happened. Come on, Vin thought, trying to draw upon the mists. Terror twisted within her as Marsh loomed, a black figure in the night. Please. Each time the mist had helped her, they had done so when she was most desperate. This was her plan, weak though it seemed, to put herself in more trouble than she'd ever been in before. Then count on the mist to help her, as they had twice before. Marsh knelt over. Images flashed like bursts of lightning through her mind. Kamen, raising his meaty hand to beat her, rain falling on her as she huddled in a dark corner, her side aching from a deep gash. Zane turning to her as she stood atop to keep hasting, one of his hands dripping a slow stream of blood. Vin tried to scramble across the slick, cold cobblestones, but her body wasn't working right. She could barely crawl. Marsh slammed a fist down on her leg, shattering the bone. And she cried out in shocked, icy pain. No pewter tempered the blow. She tried to pull herself up to grab one of Marsh's spikes, but he snatched her leg, the broken one, and her own effort only made her scream in agony. Now, Ruin said in a kindly voice, we will begin. Where is the adium, Vin? What do you know of it? Please, Vin whispered, reaching toward the mist. Please, please, please. Yet they remained aloof. One say it swirled playfully around her body, but now they pulled away instead. As they had for the entire last year, she was crying, reaching for them, but they puffed away, shunning her like a victim of the plague. It was the same way the mist treated Inquisitors. Huh? Vin has a spike somewhere in her body. It's the earring, isn't it? Does she still have... No, she doesn't have the earring. How did a spike get in her body? I am convinced of that now. How did a spike get in her body? Maybe I'm wrong. Hold on. I'm so lost. That has to be the answer. That's the only way Ruin could try to communicate with her like that? How did I not see that before? Hold on. It was the same way the mist entreated the Inquisitors. The creature rose, surrounding her, silhouettes in the dark night. Marsh yanked her back to him. Then reached for her arm. She heard her bones snap before she felt the pain. Then it came, and she screamed. It had been a long time since she'd known torture. The streets had not been kind. But during those last few years, she'd been able to repress most of those experiences. She'd become a Mistborn, powerful, protected. Not this time. She realized through the haze of agony, Sazid won't come for me. Kelsier won't save me. Even the mists have abandoned me. I'm alone. Her teeth began to chatter, and Marsh raised her other arm. He looked down at her with spiked eyes, expression unreadable, then snapped the bone. Vin screamed again, more from terror than the pain. Marsh watched her scream, listening to its sweetness. He smiled and reached down for her unbroken leg. If only Ruin weren't holding him back, then he could kill her. He strained against his bonds, lusting to do more harm. No, a tiny piece of him thought. The rain fell, marking a beautiful night. The city of Luthadel lay bedecked in its funeral best, smoldering, some parts still burning despite the rain. How he had wished he'd arrived in time to see the riots and the death. He smiled the passionate love of a fresh kill rising in him. No, he thought. Somehow he knew that the end was very near. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and he had to steady himself with one hand before continuing his work, snapping Vin's other leg. The final day had arrived. The world would not survive this night. He laughed gleefully, fully in the throes of a bloody frenzy, barely controlled, as he broke Vin's body. No, Marsh awakened. Though his hands still moved as ordered, his mind rebelled. He took the ash and the rain. He took in the ash and the rain, the blood in the suit, and it disgusted him. Vin lay nearly dead. Kelsier treated her like a daughter, he thought, and he broke her fingers. He thought as he broke her fingers one at a time. She was screaming. The daughter he never had with Mare. I've given up. Exactly as I did with the rebellion. It was a great shame of his life. Giving up leadership of the Ska Rebellion only 1 year before it, with Kelsier at its head, at last overthrew the final empire. Marsh had been its leader, but had lost hope mere months before the victory. No, he thought as he broke the fingers on her other hand. Not again. No more giving up. His left hand moved to her collarbone, and then he saw it. A single bit of metal glittering in Vin's ear, her earring. She explained it to him once. I don't remember it, Vin's voice whispered to him from the past. From when he had sat with her on the quiet veranda at Mansion Renault, watching Kelsier organize a caravan below, right before Marsh left to infiltrate the ranks of the Steel Ministry. Vin had spoken of her insane mother. Rien said that he came home one day and found my mother covered in blood. Vin said. She'd killed my baby sister. Me, however, she hadn't touched except to give me an earring. Don't trust anyone pierced my metal, Spook's letter. Even the smallest bit can taint a man. The smallest bit. As he peered closer, the earring, though twisted and chipped, looked almost like a tiny spike. He didn't think. He didn't give Ruin a time to react. Amid his inquisitor servants' thrill at killing the hero of ages, Ruin's control was weaker than it had ever been. Summoning all the will he had remaining, Marsh reached out and ripped the earring free from Vin's ear. Vin's eyes snapped open. Ash and water fell on her. Her body burned with pain, and the echoing screams of Ruin's demands still reverberated in her head. But the voice spoke no further. It had been stifled mid-sentence. What? The mist returned to her with a snap. They flowed around her, sensing the allomancy of her tin, which she had burned faintly. They spun around her as they once had, playfully, friendly. She was dying. She knew it. Marsh was done with her bones, and was obviously growing impatient. He screamed, holding his head. Then he reached down and grabbed his axe from the puddle beside him. Vin couldn't have run if she'd wanted to. Fortunately, the pain was fading. Everything was fading. It was black. Please, she thought, reaching out to the mist with one final plea. They felt so familiar all of a sudden. Or had she felt that feeling before? Where did she know them? From the Well of Ascension, of course, a voice whispered in her head. It's the same power, after all. Solid in the metal you fed to Elend. Liquid in the pool you burned. And vapor in the air confined to the night, hiding you, protecting you, giving you power. Vin gasped, drawing in breath. A breath that sucked in the mists. She felt suddenly warm, the mist surging within her, lending her strength. Her entire body burned like metal, and the pain disappeared in a flash. Marsh swung his axe for her head, spraying water, and she caught his arm. Dude, how did I not know that? I was talking for weeks on the stupid earring, how it's going to have some part to play. I thought always for good, but it was making her into essentially like a hemalurgist. It was a hemalurgy spike. That's crazy. Wow, that is actually wild. Okay, chapter 73. Got to keep reading. Dang, that's wild. That's so cool. But how is she going to heal her bones? Is one of these elementic metals the ability to heal quickly? Maybe. I hope so. Have we seen that before? Yeah. That's what the Lord Ruler was able to do. He was able to be beheaded and he was able to get healed. And I think we assume that it was because of his being a Mistborn. But maybe, or we assume that it was because of his ability to be a ferrochemist. Maybe he's storing up head for himself. That sounded bad. But maybe it's because of his Mistbornness. Maybe it's a 16th metal or something like that. Okay, we have to keep reading. No other option. I have spoken of the Inquisitor's ability to pierce copper clouds. As I said, this power is easily understood when one realizes that many Inquisitors were seekers before their transformation, which meant their bronze became twice as strong. There is at least one other case of a person who could pierce copper clouds. In her case, however, the situation was slightly different. She was Mistborn from birth, and her sister was the Seeker. The death of that sister and the subsequent inheritance of the power via the hemalurgical spike used to kill that sister left her twice as strong at burning bronze as the typical Mistborn, and that let her see through the copper clouds of lesser allomancers. Whoa! That's crazy! Wait, she killed her with the earring? The mist changed. Ten soon looked up through the ash. He lay exhausted and numb atop the hill before a field of lava that barred his path westward. His muscles felt lethargic, a sign that he had been pushing too hard. The blessing of potency could only do so much. He stood, forcing his horse body to rise, looking at his nighttime surroundings. Endless fields of ash extended behind him. Even the track he had worn to the top of the hill was close to being filled in. The lava burned ahead of him. However, something seemed different. What? The mist flowed, moving about, swirling. Generally, the mist had a chaotic pattern. Some part would flow one way, while others would spin about in the other direction. There were often rivers of motion, but they never conformed to one another. Most often they followed the wind. This night the wind was still, yet the mist seemed to be flowing in one direction. As soon as he noticed it, Tensoon found it one of the most singularly strange sights he had ever beheld. Instead of swirling or spinning, the mist moved together in a seemingly purposeful flow. They coursed around him, and he felt like a stone in a huge incorporeal river. The mist flowed toward Luthadel. Perhaps I'm not too late, he thought, regaining some of his hope. And he shook himself from his stupor and took off in a gallop, back the way he had come. Breezy, come see this. Breeze rubbed his eyes, looking across the room to where Alrianne sat in her nightgown, gazing out the window. It was late, too late. He should have been asleep. His eyes returned to his desk, and the treaty he had been working on. It was the sort of thing Sazid and Ellen should have had to write, not Breeze. You know, he said, I distinctly remember telling Kelsier that I did not want to end up in charge of anything important. Running kingdoms and cities is work for fools, not thieves. Government is far too inefficient to provide stable income, or suitable income. Breezy, Alrian said insistently, pulling on his emotions quite blatantly. He sighed, rising. Very well, he grumbled. Honestly, how is it, of all the qualified people in Kelsier's little crew, that I ended up the one leading a city? He joined Alrian at the window, peeking out. What is it exactly I'm supposed to see, dear? I don't... He trailed off, frowning. By him, Alrian touched his arm, seeming concerned as she looked out the window. Now that is strange, he said. The mist flowed past outside like a river, and they seemed to be accelerating. The door to his room slammed open. Breeze jumped, and Alrian squeaked. They spun to find Spooks standing at the doorway, still half covered in bandages. Gather the people, the boy croaked, holding the door frame to keep from collapsing. We need to move. My dear boy, Breeze said, unsettled. Alrian took Breeze's arms, holding on quietly yet tightly. My dear boy, what is this? You should be in bed. Gather them, Breeze, Spook said, suddenly, sounding very authoritative. Take them to the storage cavern. Pack them in, quickly. We don't have much time. What do you make of it? Ham asked, wiping his brow. Blood immediately oozed from the cut again, running down the side of his face. Ellen shook his head, breathing deeply, almost in gaps as he leaned back on a shelf of a jagged rock outcropping. He closed his eyes, fatigue making his body seem desperate, making his body shake despite his pewter. I don't really care about the mist right now, Ham, he whispered. I can barely think straight. Ham grunted in agreement. Around them, men screamed and died, fighting the endless waves of Colossus. They had some of the creatures bottled up in natural stone corridors leading into Fadro. But the real fights were happening on the rugged rock formations that enclosed the city. Too many Colossus were waiting outside. Too many Colossus, tired of waiting outside, had begun crawling up to attack from the flanks. It was a precarious battlefield, one that often demanded Ellen's attention. They had a large number of Allomancers, but most of them were inexperienced, having been unaware of the power until this very day. Ellen was a one-man reserve force, bounding across the defensive lines, plugging holes while Set directed tactics. More screams, more death, more metal hitting metal, rock and flesh. Why, Ellen thought with frustration, why can't I protect them? He flared his pewter, taking a deep breath and standing up in the night. The mist flowed overhead as if it pulled some invisible force. For a moment, exhausted he froze. Lord Venture, someone shouted. Ellen spun. Looking toward the sound, a youthful messenger scrambled up to the rock outcropping, wide-eyed. Oh no, Ellen thought, tensing. My lord, they're retreating, the lad said, stumbling to a halt before Ellen. What? Ham asked, standing. It's true, my lord. They pulled back from the city gates. They're leaving. Ellen immediately dropped a coin, shooting himself into the sky. Mist flowed around him, its tendrils a million tiny strings being yanked eastward. Below he saw the hulking dark forms of the Colossus running away in the night. So many of them, he thought, landing on a rock formation. We'd never have beaten them, even with Allomancers. But they were leaving, running at inhuman speed, moving toward Luthadel. Uh-oh. Vin fought like a tempest, spraying rainwater in the dark night as she threw Inquisitor after Inquisitor. She shouldn't have been alive. She had run out of pewter, yet she felt it flaring inside, burning brighter than it ever had before. She felt like a bleeding sun blazed within her, running molten through her veins. Her every steel push and iron pull slammed against her as if flushed with the power of Duralumin. Yet the metal reserves within her did not vanish. Instead, they grew stronger, vaster. She wasn't certain what was happening to her. However, she did know one thing. Suddenly, fighting 12 Inquisitors at once did not seem such an impossible task. She cried out, slapping an Inquisitor to the side, then ducking a pair of axes. She crouched, then jumped, leaping in an arc through the rain, coming down by Marsh, who still lay stunned from where she had thrown him after her rebirth. He looked up, finally seeming to focus on her, then cursed and rolled away as Vin punched downward, her fist shattering a cobblestone, throwing back a ripple of dark rainwater, splashing her arms and face, leaving black specks of ash behind. She looked toward Marsh. He rose to his feet, bare-chested, his spikes glistening in the darkness. Vin smiled, then spun on the Inquisitors, rushing her from behind. She yelled, dodging a swinging axe. Had these creatures ever seemed quick to her? Or had these creatures ever seemed quick to her? With the embrace of limitless power, she seemed to move as the mist did, light, quick, unchained. The sky spun in a tempest of its own as she attacked, moving in a swirling frenzy. The mist swirled around her, her arm in a vortex as she punched one Inquisitor in the face, throwing him back. The mist danced before her as she caught the fallen Inquisitor's axe, then sheared the arm off of another creature. She took his head next, leaving others stunned with the speed of her motion. That's 2 dead. They attacked again. She bounded away, pulling herself toward the spires above. The trail of ravens launched at her, their robes snapping in the wet darkness. She hit a spire feet first, then launched upward and pulled on an Inquisitor's spike, something that was easy to do with her new power. Her chosen quarry lurched upward ahead of his companions. Vin shot downward, meeting the Inquisitor in the air. Sorry, I just lost my place. I got a text. She grabbed him by the eye spikes and pulled, ripping them out with her newfound strength. Then she kicked off the creature and pushed against the spikes in his chest. She shot upward in the air, leaving a corpse flipping over in the end, leaving a corpse flipping end over in the rain beneath her, gaping holes in its head where the spikes had been. They could lose some spikes and live, she knew, but the removal of others was deadly. Losing both eye spikes appeared to kill them. 3. Inquisitors hit the spire she had pushed off, and they leaped up to follow her. Vin smiled and threw the spikes she had still carried, catching one of the Inquisitors in the chest with them. Then she pushed. The unfortunate Inquisitor was thrown downward, and he had hit the flat rooftop so violently that it pushed several of the spikes up out of his body. They sparkled and spun in the air, then fell by his immobile corpse. 4. The Vin's mistcloak fluttered as she shot upward in the sky. 8 Inquisitors still pursued, reaching for her, crying out. Vin raised her hands toward the creature, and she began to fall. She pushed. She hadn't realized how strong her new powers were. They were clearly akin to Duralumin, since she could affect the spikes inside an Inquisitor's body. Her overpowering push forced the whole flock of them downward as they had been swatted. In fact, her push also hit the metal spire directly beneath her. The stone architecture holding the spire in place exploded, spraying chips and dust outward as the spire crushed the building underneath it, and Vin was thrown upward. Very quickly, she blasted through the sky, mist streaking past her, the force of her push straining even her mist-enhanced body with the stress of sudden acceleration. And then she was out. She emerged into the open air like a fish leaping from the water. Beneath her, the mist covered the nighttime land as an enormous white blanket. Around her was open air, unsettling, strange. Above her, a million stars, normally visible only using tin-enhanced sight, watching her like the eyes of those long dead. Her momentum ran out, and she spun quietly. Whiteness below, light above. She noticed that she trailed a line of mist out into the main cloud. This hung like a tether ready to pull her back. In fact, all the mists were spinning slightly in an enormous weather pattern, a whirlpool of white. This is so cool. It's like a little hurricane of mist. The heart of the whirlpool was directly beneath her. She fell, plummeting toward the earth below. She entered the mist, drawing them behind her, breathing them in. As she fell, she could feel them surging about her in a massive empire-wide spiral. She welcomed them into herself, and the vortex of mist around her grew more and more violent. Instants later, Luthadel appeared, a massive black welt upon the land. She fell, streaking toward Credit Shaw and its spires, which seemed to be pointing toward her. The Inquisitors were still there. She could see them on a flat rooftop amid the spires, looking up, waiting. There were only 8, not counting Marsh. One lay impaled on a spike nearby from her push. The blow had apparently torn the center spike out of his back. 5, Vin thought, landing in the short distance away from the Inquisitors. If a single push could propel her up so far, she passed out of the mist. If a single push could propel her up so far, she passed out of the mist, then what would happen if she pushed outward? She waited quietly as the Inquisitors charged. She could see desperation in their movements. Whatever was happening to Vin, ruin apparently Ruin was apparently willing to risk every one of those creatures in hopes that they would kill her before she was complete. Mist pulled toward her, moving more and more quickly, drawn into her like water being sucked down a drain. When the Inquisitors had almost reached her, she pushed outward, throwing metal away from her with all the force she could muster, while at the same time strengthening her body with a massive flare of pewter. Stone cracked. Inquisitors cried out. And Krennic Shaw exploded. Dang. Towers toppled from their foundations. Doors ripped free from their frames. Windows lurched away. She screamed as she pushed, the ground trembling beneath her. Everything, even the rocks and stone, which obviously contained residual traces of metal ore, was thrown violently back. She gasped, stopping her push. She drew in breath, feeling the rain splattering against her. The building that had been the Lord Ruler's palace was gone, flattened to rubble that spread out and away from her like an impact crater. An Inquisitor burst from the rubble, face bleeding from where one of his spikes had ripped free. Vin raised a hand, pulling and setting herself from behind. The Inquisitor's head lurched, his other eye spike pulling out. He toppled forward, and Vin caught the spike, pushing it toward another Inquisitor who was rushing her. He raised a hand to push back at her, and she drove it forward anyway, ignoring his push with a quick push behind her for stability. He was thrown away, slammed into the remnants of the wall. The spike continued forward, pushing like a fish darting through water, ignoring the current. The spike slammed into the Inquisitor's face, crushing it, pinning its head against the granite. 6 and 7. Vin stalked across the rubble, mist storming. Overhead they swirled furiously, forming a funnel cloud with her at its focus. It was like a tornado, but with no air currents. Only impalpable mists, painted on the air, spinning, swirling, coming to her silent command. She stepped over an Inquisitor's corpse that had been crushed by the rubble. She kicked off his head to make certain he was dead. 8. 3 rushed at her once. She shouted, turning, and pulled on a fallen spire. The massive construction of metal, nearly as big as a building, lurched into the air, spinning at her command. She slammed it into this Inquisitor like a club, crushing them. She turned, leaving the enormous iron pillar resting atop their corpses. 9, 10, 11. The storm broke, though the mists continued to swirl. The rain let up as Vin walked across the shattered building, eyes searching for blue allomantic lines that were moving. She found one trembling before her, and she picked up and tossed aside an enormous marble disc. An Inquisitor groaned beneath. She reached for him, and she realized that her hand was leaking mist. It didn't just swirl around her, it came from her, smoking forth from the pores into her skin. She breathed out the mists puffed before her, and then immediately entered the vortex and was pulled in again. She grabbed the Inquisitor, yanking him up. His skin began to heal as he used his ferrochemical powers, as he struggled, growing again stronger. Yet even the awesome strength of ferrochemy made little difference against Vin. She pulled his eye spikes free, tossed them aside, then left... I have an encoding overload. All right, I think we're good still. She found the Inquisitors. She pulled his eye spikes free, tossed them aside, and left the corpse slumping in the rubble. 12. Sorry. She found the last Inquisitor huddled in a pool of rainwater. It was Marsh. His body was broken. Hold on one second. It says keep setting encoding overload. I'm going to just restart it. Okay, back. Sorry. She pulled his eye spikes free, tossed them aside, and left the corpse slumping in the rubble. 12. She found the last Inquisitor huddled in a pool of rainwater. It was Marsh. His body was broken, and he was missing one of the spikes from his ribs. The spike hole was bleeding, but that one apparently wasn't enough to kill him. He turned his pair of spike heads to look up at her, his expression stiff. Vin paused, breathing deeply, feeling rainwater trail down her arms and drip off her fingers. She still burned within, and she looked up, staring into the vortex of mists. It was spinning so powerfully, twisting down, she was having trouble thinking, for all the energy that coursed through her. She looked at the Inquisitor again. This isn't Marsh, she thought. Kelsier's brother is long dead. This is something else. Ruin. The mist swirled in a final tempest, the circular motion growing faster and tighter as the last wisps of smoke spun down and were pulled into Vin's body. Then the mists were gone. Starlight shone above, and flecks of ash fell in the night. Flecks of ash fell in the air. The night landscape was eerie in stillness. blackness and clarity. Even with tin, which let her see at night far better than a normal person could, the mists had always been there. To see the night landscape without them was wrong. Vin began to tremble. She gasped, feeling the fire within her blaze hotter and hotter. It was allomancy as she had never known it. And she now knew she had never understood it. The power was far greater than metals, than mere pushes and pulls. It was something awesomely more vast, a power that men had used yet never comprehended. She forced her eyes open. There was one inquisitor left. She had drawn them to Luthadel, forced them to expose themselves, laying a trap for someone far more powerful than her. And the mists had responded. It was time to finish what she had come for. Marsh watched limply as Vin fell to her knees, shaking. She reached for one of his eye spikes. There was nothing he could do. He used up most of his healing in his metal mind, and the rest would do him no good. Stored healing worked by way of speed. He could either heal himself in a small amount very quickly, or wait and heal himself slowly, completely. In any case, he was dead as soon as Vin pulled those spikes free. Finally, he thought with a relief, as she grabbed the first spike, whatever I did, it worked. Somehow. He felt Ruin's rage, felt his master realizing his mistake. In the end, Marsh had mattered. In the end, Marsh hadn't given up. He'd done Mare proud. Vin pulled the spike free. It hurt, of course, hurt far more than Marsh would have thought possible. He screamed, both in pain and joy, as Vin reached for the other eye spike. And she hesitated. Marsh waited expectantly. She shook, then coughed, cringing. She gritted her teeth, reaching toward him. Her fingers touched the spike. And then Vin vanished. She left behind the misty outline of a young woman. That dissipated and was soon gone too, leaving Marsh alone in the wreckage of a palace, head blazing with pain, covered in sickly, sodden ash. What? Okay. What the heck is going on? I need to go read. I'll be back later, guys. This was insane. What the heck is going on? That is mind-blowing. Where'd she go? Huh. Okay. I gotta figure this out. I gotta go read. I'm so confused. Okay, I'll be back later.